All right, welcome to another episode of the Endurance Matters podcast. Today in studio, I have the pleasure of welcoming Eric Hinman. Eric truly lives at the intersection of movement, mindset, and mastery. For those that don't know Eric, he is a 5-time Ironman finisher, entrepreneur, brand builder, and wellness enthusiast. Eric, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me, Justin.
Awesome. Well, I start off the podcast with like an icebreaker, hard-hitting question. So my one for you today is, you're a hybrid athlete. I'm pure endurance athlete. And so I'm curious to hear, if you had to compete or play a sport for like 8 to 10 hours, and it can't be a traditional endurance sport, swimming, cycling, running, what would you choose?
Ooh, great question. Probably basketball.
Really?
Of the major sports. Basketball was my favorite sport growing up. You know, I grew up in the 80s and 90s with Michael Jordan and the Bulls dynasty. So basketball was my favorite thing in the world. So yeah, play basketball for 8 hours.
You got to have pretty good like endurance to be able to play basketball for 8 to 10 hours. Because I thought about this, and I played basketball growing up as well. I grew up in Chicago, so I'd go to Bulls games all the time. My dad shared season tickets with his friends, so I would go there, I don't know, like 8, 10 times a year, and loved playing basketball growing up. I was thinking maybe for me it'd have to be like F1 or NASCAR, sitting in the car and using my brain a little bit more, because maybe my body would give out playing basketball for 10 hours, but that's a good one. Well, cool. So I want to start off the podcast today by talking a little bit, rewinding. Just maybe you could start off by telling the audience about, where you grew up and sort of, your beginnings in life.
Yeah, I grew up in a small town in upstate New York called Pulaski, New York on Lake Ontario, and played 3 sports. I played basketball, I ran cross country and ran track in high school. Also played Little League and Senior League baseball, played 1 year of football, so love team sports. Grew up salmon fishing, snowmobiling with my dad. We got 200 plus inches of snow every single year, so, winters were pretty harsh. And I went to college at SUNY Geneseo, a state school in Rochester, New York, for business management. Knew that I wanted to be a business owner and entrepreneur. So all through school, I knew I was probably going to go into the same business that my father was in, which was property and casualty insurance. He was the CEO of a small mutual insurance company in upstate New York. And right out of college, I went to work for him. And during college, I got into weightlifting, but very vanity-based. So bench press and bicep curls and just wanting to look good in spring break. So working for my dad for a couple years, and then started my own insurance agency. I was driving 50,000 miles a year, sitting in a car, eating McDonald's for breakfast, Subway for lunch, and as much pasta as I could possibly eat for dinner. Really had no education around, a healthy lifestyle. I knew that exercise was good for you, but I always thought it was just to look a certain way, not to feel a certain way. So, all through my 20s, partying hard, drinking every weekend. And by my late 20s, I was pretty out of shape. I weighed over 200 pounds, kind of flabby. I was going to the gym still 2 to 3 days a week, but just like 20, 30-minute workouts. And I was wearing this tight button-down shirt, and I had this fat roll that was just kind of hanging out from it. And that was my aha moment of like, shit, I'm really out of shape now. I look horrible. So I hired a personal trainer in my late 20s and committed to 6 months, 5 days a week, training for 30 minutes with a personal trainer. And over that 6-month period, I lost quite a bit of body fat. I lost weight. I started to gain strength. And I really started to recognize the correlation between exercise and how I was feeling, mentally, emotionally. I didn't have a lull anymore in the afternoons. During that time period, I also started learning a bit about diet and supplementation. And through all of that, I found triathlon and signed up for my first sprint distance triathlon in Cazenovia, New York. Had no swimming background other than doggy paddling to save my life in Lake Ontario. And I had the running background, but I had no biking background. So bought one of the fancy triathlon bikes, which was honestly what got me into it. A bunch of my friends were doing the Syracuse half Ironman, and they had these fancy bikes with 4 handlebars. And I'm like, what do you do with those middle handlebars? And they showed me the arrow position. I'm like, that's cool. So that's what got me into it, was the cool bike. Did the sprint distance triathlon, had to side stroke and backstroke to get through the swim, which was only 800 meters. Passed a lot of people on the bike because I was doing these CrossFit type workouts with my personal trainer. So, my legs and engine had gotten pretty fit, and then passed people on the run. And I think I ended up 4th place in my age group in the amateur division. There are all these different divisions where you could potentially place, but it was encouraging enough that I'm like, I think I could be pretty good at this. So, signed up for another first sprint distance triathlon, then an Olympic distance triathlon, and then hired a coach and committed to doing the Eagleman half Ironman in Cambridge, Maryland. That was June of 2011. So, this is over like a 1.5-year period where I went from sprint distance to doing my first half Ironman. And I had these ambitious goals at Eagleman to get one of the Kona qualifying slots. I don't know if they do that anymore or not, but, I think they had a couple for each age group. And, at that point, I was starting to look really fit because I was doing these CrossFit type workouts with a personal trainer. I was doing lots of cardio, but pretty much all of my workouts were at a high intensity because that's how I thought you got fitter. That was what my personal trainer was having me doing, lifting heavier each week and going a little harder on the rowing and different conditioning intervals. So that's how I was treating triathlon as well. It was just like I'd show up to this Wednesday night triathlon club and try to win it every single time. And I just was trying to go faster on the bike and faster on the run with each one. But because of that, I obviously wasn't able to put in the type of volume necessary to be fast at a half or a full. So Eagleman was a slap in the face. The swim I never really excelled at, so that was just kind of survival to get through the swim. And then on the bike, I had gotten decent at biking. I want to say I biked maybe a 230, 240 bike split there. And on the run, I went out at a sub 7 minute per mile pace, which I had no business doing. I think by mile 5, I was at like an 8:45 pace, and by mile 7, I was walking. End of the race, I had to stand under a fire hose for like 30 minutes to come back to life. And I told my friends and girlfriend at the time, I'm never doing that again. That was brutal. And then like 40 minutes later, I'm signing up for Ironman Lake Placid the next year. It's amazing how it sucks you in.
That's totally how it goes. And Maryland's one of those really tough. It doesn't look that tough on paper because it's flat there, but it's got the chop in the river. It's always hot. It's always humid. So yeah, they're actually, I don't think they're doing the Ironman, the Kona slots there at Eagleman anymore, but that was a cool time. And I definitely remember that. We were talking a little bit before off air about how we probably just intersected slightly there as I got into triathlon, probably 2007, 2008. But yeah, that's definitely a really cool story. So I'm curious to hear a little bit more about you just getting into triathlon and getting into sports as an adult. Did you always have that competitive fire growing up, competing in high school, and you sort of were missing that when you came out of high school and into college, and then you found it with this personal trainer and triathlon?
For sure. I mean, I love progress. I've always been competitive with myself, whether it was getting good grades in college or, building my insurance business and just kind of seeing it grow over time. I like progress in whatever I'm doing, and I like having purpose. So I really found that in triathlon where, every single day was a little more progress towards my goal of getting to Kona. And when I hired the coach and he taught me the right way to train for triathlon versus just trying to go faster every single time, that's when it really started to click. And, that was fun for me because, then I started seeing major progress on race day. In training, it was just, pretty much going through the same motions every day, same heart rate when I was running and same wattage biking. But it was amazing how that compounded over time and just got me like fast without having to go fast. Towards the end of triathlon, I was definitely doing some track sessions and doing some higher intensity intervals on the bike. But what I really needed then, because I was coming into it with strength and some anaerobic conditioning from the personal trainer, what I really needed was volume just to create oxygen efficiency and build this big aerobic base and build muscle endurance. So yeah, slow down to speed up. That was the biggest lesson I learned in triathlon, where I was just doing everything in the gray zone. And he's like, you either got to go slower for your workouts or you got to go a lot harder for your workouts. That's where the magic is made.
Sure, 100%. I want to rewind a little bit and talk more about the business side of things and how that maybe paralleled this triathlon journey or the endurance sport journey that you've sort of landed at now. Can you elaborate a little bit on sort of that journey from starting to work with your dad, growing up the insurance business, and sort of how that evolved to the next steps after that and the businesses that you got into from that point forward?
Yeah, you bet. So entrepreneur through and through. I love starting things, probably to a fault. I've started many things and, you see the successes, but you don't see the failures. And, a lot of my business career was before social media. So many people see me now as just, a guy who works with brands and a content creator and works out all the time, but, obviously don't see the foundation that built all of that. So the insurance business was 2002 to 2009, building that. And in 2009, 2009, I hired a secretary to manage my book of business. I still own that business. My father, ironically, runs that for me now and has for the last 4 or 5 years. So, that was my bread and butter for a long time, for 15 plus years. That was my bread and butter income. And then I started a software company in 2009 called Rounded. It was a mobile app development company. We were doing business with mainly businesses, building mobile apps and mobile websites for them. So that was 2009 until 2014. Sold my shares in that company in 2014. Late 2013, because I had really gotten into the fitness space, I started a CrossFit gym in Syracuse, New York. It was called Urban Life Athletics, CrossFit, indoor cycling studio, HIIT studio. And through the gym, I met my business partner in some restaurants that I co-opened called Original Grain and Exo Taco. So, hospitality, insurance, software, that was kind of all of the business stuff before getting into the world that I'm in now, which is working with brands in the wellness space, creating content for them. And I invest in many of the brands I work with. I help them build their ambassador program. So identifying other people that they should work with, people like you, like getting products on the podcast where you can create awareness for the brands. And, that's turned into an incredible business over the last 7 years. But I would say my first piece of content I ever created on Instagram was back in like 2010, 2011, fairly soon after Instagram was launched. And, I had zero intention of that becoming a business or becoming a brand. And it wasn't until 2017 that I started to recognize the opportunity that we all have of a mobile device in our hands to be able to create content and build an audience and engage with them. And, obviously wherever there's eyeballs, marketing dollars are going to go.
Yep. Can you talk to me a little bit about where the genesis for these business ideas come from? Is it something where you're sitting up at night and it sort of pops in your head, or is it just a matter of being in the right place at the right time? How do these things come about?
Yeah, I think it's a combination of all of that. So I've always been a whore for good marketing. I'm the guy who goes to Erewhon in California and wants to buy every single product there because it all looks so awesome. So, and I've always been an early adopter with technology. I had a Tesla back in 2012 when they came out with the Model S. Had one of the first iPhones. I love early adopting in the tech space, the wellness space, the consumer packaged goods space. So I think that's a portion of it where I just love branding and identity, and I love seeing people like become friends with a brand. And the business side of it, I think I picked up a lot of that through my dad, seeing him lead people, seeing him build a team, understanding, just cash is king and how to, run a business. And I've only really been involved in smaller businesses, and I recognize now that I'm really good at like the early stages of a business. And then once it's up and running, like I don't really want to be involved in the customer experience or, customer inquiries. I don't want to be managing people, hiring and firing. I'm not the systems guy putting all of that in place. I'm the creator. I really like creating the brand, getting people excited about it, figuring out like what is the product market fit, who's the audience that's going to be receptive to this, building the initial hype around it, the initial ambassador team, the marketing plan. And then, once it's up and running and growing, then I'm not as interested. So I think that's why I've fallen into the position that I am now as, early stage wellness brands come to me and they're like, hey, we're spinning this up, or, we're 4 months in, we need help growing our community and growing the brand. Can you help us with that? And I'm like, oh yeah, that is my specialty. I love doing that. And, that's why many of the brands I work with, they're early stage wellness brands. That's where I know I can add the most value.
Sure, that totally makes sense. Sponsor of today's episode, Precision Fuel and Hydration. These guys have been an amazing partner for the show, and it's really a product that I use every single day in my training to help me go faster, feel better. So in today's day and age, we all know high carb is sort of the thing. And so previously I've spoken about how much I like the chews, and I'm still munching on those pretty much every single day in training, but I've really been getting into the PF90 gels. That's been a really big value add for me to have 3 gels in one. And I feel like sometimes I'll just take that entire gel all at once or go half and half. It just allows me to get a little bit more carbohydrate and sort of just bump everything up and feel a little bit better in training. So if you want to try that for yourself, head on over to pfnh.com and use code BigMetz2025 for 15% off. I'm curious to hear about maybe like what it takes in terms of risk to get a business off the ground straight away. So maybe rather than now when businesses are maybe approaching you or you're approaching businesses with, hey, I have a somewhat formula and I feel confident in knowing how to do this. Maybe in the early stages, what differentiates you from actually going and executing upon an idea and taking that risk financially with your time or whatever, and those who are maybe still sitting on the couch and just have the idea in their brain and don't ever take action upon it.
Yeah, for sure. It's not easy. I mean, many of these fail, and I've had failures along the way. I've certainly invested in brands that have failed. So, it's kind of a numbers game where you have to do it enough times, A, to find success, and then B, to develop a risk tolerance of like, okay, life's not over if it fails. I just move on to the next one. But, you can definitely mitigate some of those risks by doing it time and time again. Like now I know what to look for in a founder. I know what to look for as far as like growth and customer acquisition costs. I know what to look for product market fit. I really just play in the wellness space where I have a really good understanding of what, people are consuming in that space. So I think you can eliminate a lot of it, but it comes down to like, do you want to pour your heart and soul into this for enough time that it becomes successful? And oftentimes the case is, the answer is no. People want immediate success because you see lots of success now on social media. And, many of the businesses that I've started, they failed, A, or B, it took 2 or 3 years for them to start actually making some money. And many of the companies I invest in, on paper, they're doing well, but I haven't seen any kind of return. So you got to be patient and willing to wait. And, I've always had that foundation that I built early on. And that's my advice that I give young people is, in your first career, don't just trade time for money. Try to build residual income or try and build some kind of asset, whether it's your business or, buying a multifamily home and renting out 3 of the bedrooms to other people. And that helps pay for your mortgage. Like you got to hustle early on and you got to build that foundation. I'm 45 now, and as you age, you're able to compound things. Like now money compounds for me, and my connections compound for me, and my knowledge compound for me. But early on, it's just like you got to hustle and you got to take risks. You got to meet a lot of people. You got to collect a lot of dots, and you got to just like leverage time. That's your most valuable asset when you're young.
Yeah, that's good to hear because I feel like even in my generation, and especially the generations below me, feel like we want that immediate return. It feels like, we're grinding so hard, we're working so hard, and we want that to happen right away. But I think I've been fortunate in my career being a professional athlete and understanding that really takes a lot of time and you need those compounding hours of training in order to ultimately reap the rewards and success. And it just takes a level of persistence and commitment to the goal. And I think same goes for business. Yep. I want to talk a little bit more about where you're at today in terms of you sort of calling yourself a brand builder. Can you explain to me and the audience like what you define that as?
Yeah. So helping brands grow with awareness. And, a lot of that is ROI. So providing return on their investment in me. And that could be, content that performs well for them, discount codes that they can directly track. But a lot of it is more behind the scenes of just putting all the pieces together. So, hey, you need someone who's really good at paid social to help you with Meta and TikTok. You need ambassadors. You need people spreading awareness. You need community events. You should spin up a run club, or you should partner with run clubs. Here's some podcasters I know that you can get product on the table so that people are seeing it when they're watching the podcast. So I'm really playing matchmaker for a lot of what I do. But my resume is certainly my audience on social media and creating content for brands I work with to generate awareness for them. And it's just amazing how much money is poured into that space over the last 7 years, because that's where people's eyeballs are. They're moving away from radio and TV and billboards and all of these other sources where marketing dollars traditionally went towards, and they're moving towards people who have these niche audiences and they've created an engaged community. And I feel like that is the key. It's not so much this number next to your name. It's, do you have a community? Do you have people that really, are intrigued with your lifestyle? You've shared enough, value with them that, they want to buy things that you're involved in. So, that's the biggest key, because a lot of people can go viral now fairly fast just with one piece of content, but they haven't cultivated a community in doing that. So, I really feel like all good things in life, they come from compounding consistencies. And I've just done it a long time where I've just added incremental value every single day with feed posts and story posts and sharing my journey, whether it was Ironman or CrossFit or High Rocks or diet or sleep, whatever it is. And then over time, you have this really engaged audience that, marketers are going to want to spend marketing dollars on because your audience is really engaged.
Sure. What do you think differentiates you from the millions of other people out there trying to be social media influencers, because I think especially now with the growth of it, people are understanding this is part of the game. This is how you can potentially make a living, and this is something that you need to be really attuned to. But I think for every 1% of people that are successful on social media, there's 99% of people who are posting and getting 10 likes.
100%.
What are you doing to be a difference maker?
Yeah, I mean, I would say my business background is one of my differentiating factors in that I've started companies, I've invested in companies, so I understand to be in their position what they want of me, and I know that I have to provide a return on their investment, so I come into this with that hat. I know a lot of professional athletes historically. I see it changing now, but, with their sponsors, they would just like post a picture on a podium and then tag their sponsors in the bottom. Did they create a little bit of awareness? Yeah, but, they didn't really sell anyone on why that product or why that formula. I'm certainly seeing more and more with podcasters like you or, David Roche on YouTube explaining all of the things he's doing, explaining his fueling, explaining the heat training, all of that. So, that's going to convert for brands. So I do that differently than many others. And then as far as growing a following and engaging with your following, it's really changed over time what works. Now what works, for me at least, is kind of being more relatable to the masses. So instead of just sharing, tips on high rocks or something that's kind of niche, I'm really sharing my journey. I'm sharing, in my 20s, the decisions I was making and what that led me to, and the decisions I make in my 40s and what that has led me to. And I certainly use a comparison picture that's going to get people's attention. Ultimately, you need to figure out, how do you stop people's thumbs with what you're posting? And then, how can you be unique? Like, that is a very unique story to me, and that is a different story than most have. Most people were more fit in their 20s than they were in their mid 40s. So I run with that story. So I would say that's where I've really differentiated myself from other creators out there. There's a million ways to do that. You can definitely, share a journey. There's this guy who goes into the woods every single day and tries to lift a stump over his head, hasn't been able to get it over his head for like 3 years, and he has 500,000 followers that, watch him every day to see if he can get the stump above his head. So sharing a journey that you're on is definitely a great way to, build an engaged audience. I mean, I really like to think of this as a TV show now. The Kardashians, you know who the Kardashians are, you know what they're going to be doing each time, but there's this kind of element of surprise of who are they going to be with, what car are they going to be in, what obnoxious thing is going to happen on the show. And, that's kind of what social media is becoming. Like, it's your own little show that you get to broadcast.
Do you feel like it takes a certain personality to be able to do that? Because I think it takes a level of vulnerability to tell the whole story, the successes, the failures, those moments when you can't lift the stump over your head. Mm-hmm. And I've known that myself, especially with, social media being a big part of my professional career. I think there were times in my career where I was very vulnerable on social media, and I felt like at times I was judged for that vulnerability. And mm-hmm. even if it's one comment or two comments in a sea of 200, mm-hmm. those one or two comments can kind of hurt you a little bit more than the rest. Mm-hmm. So what does it say about your personality in terms of being able to absorb maybe some of the negativity that comes along with that vulnerability that you need to express?
Sure. I mean, it certainly affects me too. And, I think that you have to recognize that the more you put yourself out there, the more you're treated as a public figure than a human. People are really nice to me in person. I can count on one hand the number of people that have been an asshole to me, for sure. In person. But on social media, there's 20 assholes every day that comment on something. So, I just separate the two of like, I'm treated like a public figure on social media. I know my close circle, my friends, the people who actually, know who I am. Like, they're not hating on me every single day. So you really need to separate the two. And, any professional athlete obviously is scrutinized just like that too. They're treated as a public figure. So you have to really separate it. And, if you're just being true to yourself and sharing your journey and sharing things you're passionate about, then, you feel good inside. And ultimately that's what I care about most, is feeling good inside. But, don't let me, it definitely affects your mood when you get a bad comment. And it's just crazy how like one bad comment can negate 100 positive comments.
Yeah, it's crazy. It's an interesting one with that. Do you ever get sucked into that Instagram trap hole that I think some people do, of the like immediate gratification, the reactivity that comes with social media, some of like the getting sucked into some of those comments that aren't necessarily super positive? Does that stuff bother you? Or have you just trained yourself to block those out and just do what you do?
Yeah, over time I've trained myself to block them out. But yeah, I mean, those first few really hurt, and those next 100 hurt, and then the next 100 not so much. And yeah, now for the most part, it's just kind of blocking it out.
Sure. When you're sitting down, you obviously come from an experienced business background, and you're thinking about this new-ish journey on social media. How calculated and targeted are you with your content planning, the people that you're meeting up with, the collaborative posts that you're doing, a business plan in terms of an agenda? How structured is it?
It's not super structured. For me, I never wanted this to get in the way of how I live my life. So, every single day you'll find me at the gym training for the most part. Every afternoon you'll find me in the mountains, mountain biking. Every night at 5 p.m. I have people over to the house to do contrast therapy. Most nights I'm having dinner, barbecue with my girlfriend and friends who stay over. So those things are super important to me, and I want to make sure that like work does not get in the way of those things, and making money does not get in the way of those things. I really learned that with the insurance business, that, the more I made, I didn't get happier. There was a certain point where I'm like, this is great. Like, I don't have to worry about bills anymore, and I don't, I can go out to restaurants and whatever. But the incremental increases didn't make me any happier. So I've always wanted to be careful that this didn't get in the way of the freedom and flexibility that I have to do the things that I really, really enjoy. With that said, I mean, I have contractual obligations, so I definitely keep track of my commitments to brands that I have. And I am intentional with my day. I'm intentional with how we designed our home. Our home here is called Muscle Mountain, which you'll have to come over and hit a workout.
Tim told me about Muscle Mountain.
Yeah, you got to come. So, the backyard is basically a production studio. And, I moved to Colorado, and in moving to Colorado, it made for like the ability to easily take beautiful pictures and videos. So I am very cognizant of the environments I put myself in and removing friction from what I do. I do have a photographer, videographer who comes over once a week. We shoot content together. So that is now structured where, up until about a year ago, it was just all me shooting content for everything. And I time block. I have blocks of time where I'm working out, blocks of time where I'm taking calls, blocks of time where I'm doing podcasts, blocks of time where, I'm editing content. So I've just kind of structured my life in a way where I can do the things I need to do each day, but it doesn't get in the way, again, of that freedom and flexibility to do the things that I really enjoy.
Sure. Talk to me a little bit about, in your daily routine, what are your non-negotiables?
Yeah, so I have this list of tiny wins, and I can send it to you after if I miss any, but getting my heart rate above 150 most days, so spiking my heart rate, doing something athletic, lifting something heavy, getting outside, planning an adventure. I love having things to look forward to, so I always have adventures that are lined up. Hug, kiss, share love with people that you enjoy being around. Eat wholesome food with positive people, meet at least one new person every single day. Nice. What else is on there? Sleep at least, I think I had 8 hours on my tiny wins list. I usually now I'm at least 7. I try to get 8+ hours of sleep every single night. Try to make the perfect cup of espresso in the morning. Pick something skill-based. I love progress, so just always having skill-based activities in my day. Give with not expecting anything in return. Oftentimes, that is on social media, just sharing input. Post a piece of content every single day. I just, my having a personal brand has brought me so many opportunities. So, just being consistent in those things, that ultimately I know leads me to what I call my perfect day, rinse and repeat as many days as possible.
Is it hard to stick with that every single day? Because inherently there are going to be things that go wrong, right? You travel, you don't sleep, you miss your workout, you get injured. Like, what do the days look like where that doesn't necessarily go to plan?
Yeah, I mean, it's easier than you would think because, again, I've structured my day in a way that, like, these things are all time blocked, and I've also removed a lot of friction. Like, it's not hard for me to just tie my shoes up and run 1 mile to the trailhead, and I can mountain bike right from the house, and our backyard is a gym. We have saunas and cold plunges in the backyard. So many of these things, I just don't have any friction around, and I was intentional in, designing my life in that way. But yeah, I mean, on days where that doesn't happen, I know that I can get back on track fairly fast the next day. And, I don't book early flights. I usually book flights afternoon so I can at least get a morning workout in. Like, there's a lot of things where I kind of go out of my way to make sure I still can get a lot of those different things in. And even when I travel, I have kind of built-in networks now in a lot of cities where I have access to the gym. I have access to a sauna or cold plunge. So even in traveling, I'm still like really doing a lot of these things every single day.
Sure. So it seems like you've been able to carve out what it looks like to have a perfect day. And I think a lot of people out there, especially with social media, are just like inundated with different content, like drink a cup of water in the morning. No, drink in the afternoon. You need to go to bed by 9, or no, you need to stay up until 12. You need to fast until 12. No, you need to have breakfast with coffee. Like all of these different competing sort of opinions. How did you formulate what your perfect day looks like and come up with and stick to that?
Yeah, trial and error, and like living a life where I didn't feel like I was thriving, and then finding a life where I thought I was thriving. And what I did is I made lists. I made a list of environments, conversations, activities, people where I was just completely in the moment. I felt like I was in flow state. And I made another list of all of those times where my mind was wandering, the conversations I was having, the activities I was doing, the environments I was in, and slowly started to strip all of those things away and just build my life around all of those things. And a lot of them also are like in order. Like, I know if I get my morning workout in, that I'm going to be really productive after that. I'm going to have great conversations with people. I'm going to be creative. I'll create better content after a morning workout. And then I love doing the contrast therapy in the evening because that's generally when people can join me. And I really like community time and I like meeting new people. So I have that as kind of the end of the day. And I also look at that as like blowing the dust off a Nintendo game. I'm dating myself here, but just like a reset to my nervous system of, I just had a busy day, probably was pretty good, but if anything bad went wrong, when I do that contrast therapy session, it's just like a reset button for, my mind and my nervous system. I always just feel like calm and clear afterwards.
Sure. I want to talk more about that specifically because Tim mentioned that to me when I spoke to Tim O'Donnell, who's a friend of the podcast, have had him on, and obviously people know that he's a good buddy of mine. He was talking to me about these sort of like social community evenings that you have. So is that something you're actually doing every single evening, having people over to your home and doing the contrast therapy?
90% of the time, yes. God bless my girlfriend that she allows it. But yeah, I have a guy coming over tonight who he was a D1 hockey player who I've never met before. He's moving back home from college to Boulder, and he DM'd me on Instagram and said, hey, I see you have people over at your house all the time. Can I swing by? Yeah, dude, 5 p.m. on Tuesday, Wednesday, come over. So
are you having these people over just to chat? Like, is there, you said you're trying to give, without any expectation of return, but I guess there is a social, like there's a networking component. And I guess like the question that I'm formulating here is that something that adds a lot of value versus the detraction of like, because I think if I had people over to our house at 5 o'clock every evening, my wife would freak out. And how does that add so much value to your life that it's something that you want to do all the time?
Yeah, so I grew up as an only child, so no brothers and sisters, and I used to have friends over to play basketball in my parents' backyard and play ping pong every single night. In college, I threw massive parties. I love like having people over and leaving people with a memorable like experience. And now luckily they usually leave feeling better than when they came.
Sure.
But yeah, I love meeting people, and do opportunities come from that? Of course they do. And I've recognized that over time that, having a large network and just like occupying a really, really small amount of a lot of people's minds through either, social media posts or, having people over, like opportunities come back to you. So, does that happen? Yes, definitely. But ultimately, I just enjoy being around other people and meeting new people and having conversations with people and, seeing if I can connect this person with people that'll add value for him. And, most nights it's like 3 or 4 people who come over, and many times those people don't know each other and they go off and they have these friendships. And I think that's so cool.
Yeah, that's really cool. How much of it is the actual environment of like sauna and cold plunge? Because I spent like 16 weeks in Scandinavia, 2017, and the sauna culture there is massive. They like have them on the fjord, so you go sauna right into the fjord back and forth. And I feel like similarly you have conversations in this shared experience that's very unique. It's not unique for you because you do it every night, but for someone else, it really is a sort of like a formulating moment. How much of that environment is important for those relationship starters?
It's super important. So I'm going to do it every night anyways, and I would prefer to do it with others, where like my mountain bike rides, I generally am doing that alone. Like I'm not inviting people in for that. I'm not inviting people in throughout the day. I'm not taking coffee meetings. I'm not, for the most part, inviting people in for my workouts, because those are all for me. Like I want to progress in those things. And, I have to get shit done. So, but the sauna session, like that's a time where my phone is away and we're in this captive environment, that there's something to the heat where you just become vulnerable really quick with people. And I've had some of the best conversations of my life in a sauna. So I'm intentional with that of like, this is my meeting place. Like if you want to link up, let's do it. 5 p.m. next Wednesday, come to the sauna. There'll probably be 3 or 4 other people. We'll have an awesome conversation. So yeah, there's huge importance around the sauna component of it, because I do feel like, I think it's a better environment than a bar to have amazing conversations with people.
Yeah, that's really, really cool. I want to talk more about your current athletic endeavors. Off podcast, we were talking about you were preparing for Leadville right now, but it seems like you're still really intentional about balancing strength training in the gym. And I know you're doing a bit of high rock. So talk to me a little bit more about what you're focused on right now and how you're balancing the training and the intentionality for each goal.
Yeah, so I used to be so scared about losing a certain form of fitness if I started doing something else. So for example, in the triathlon years, if I went a day or 2 without running, I felt like I'd lose all my run fitness, and same with biking in the pool. And then when I got heavy into CrossFit, I'm like, if I run, I'm going to lose all of that strength I've built in the CrossFit gym. I've now just ebbed and flowed through these different worlds enough to understand that, once you build to a certain capacity in something, it's much easier to get it back. So, right now I kind of focus on what I'm most interested in. So right now, Leadville, I have that coming up in early August. So that is my primary focus. I'm getting in at least 10 to 15 hours a week of mountain bike time, and I want to be super fit so that, I have a time goal, but more importantly, I don't want to feel like shit while I'm out there, because I've done it before where I only built to like a 90-minute ride and then did Leadville, and it was like a lot of suffering hours. Yeah. I don't want it to be a sufferfest. I want it to be fun. So a lot of my training for that is just to make it enjoyable. Like I want to go out there and race with a bunch of people and have a good time. So biking is the priority now. With that said, high rocks is kind of on what I'll call maintenance mode. So I'm in the gym 4 days per week doing strength training, complex lifts like squats and bench press and overhead press, and pulling movements like deadlift, and then high rock specific movements that are in the race. And then I'm running right now about 15 miles a week. After Leadville, I'll shift back into a high rocks focus mode. My first race of the season is Toronto in October, and I had the goal this year of winning my age group. I thought I was in a good place to do that. I unfortunately had a horrible time outcome at the Chicago race. But next year, I age up to 45-49, so I would like to win my age group. That will be my main goal for next year. And, with that, then I have to shift my focus back to more high rocks training. So, that's 5 days a week in the gym, doing a bit of zone 4 workout with high rock specific movements and like in a time domain that is high rock. So the runs and the workout stations are generally around like the 3 to 5 minute range. So just spending 3 to 5 minutes for the various movements I'm doing to build that type of muscle endurance, at a moderately high heart rate, and then running at least 30 miles a week. Like running for me, I feel like is still where I can make up the most ground in high rocks. And then I think I'm 98% sure I'm going to do Leadman next year, and that 100-mile run really scares me. So I will have to massively build my run fitness back up, but I'm really enjoying the running again. So rewind 6-7 months ago, I did High Rocks Chicago with my buddy Jack, and the last 4 or 5 years I hadn't been running much. I was really focused on CrossFit. I was getting stronger, but I basically had to give up running to get strong enough to be competitive in CrossFit. But I've recognized that I enjoy training for CrossFit, but I don't really enjoy competing in CrossFit, especially coming from the Ironman background of like, I want to do something for 10 hours and like just be completely spent afterwards. And the next 2 days, I can't do anything. And CrossFit is not that. CrossFit is about, short power output. You certainly have to be obscenely strong and obscenely powerful. But I don't get that same fulfillment out of finishing a CrossFit workout or CrossFit competition that I do when I finish a 4-hour ride or a 2-hour run or an Ironman. So, getting back into high rocks and getting back into more of this endurance training, it just feels more fulfilling for me to compete in those sports when I cross the finish line than it does competing in CrossFit. But I mean, I still enjoy CrossFit. CrossFit has been so hard for me to get good at because there's just so many complexities to it. You have to be so strong. You have to be so anaerobic. And I do feel like I'm naturally much more gifted at slow twitch muscle and endurance and just kind of that, mental toughness and grit than I am at like 7 minutes of all out effort.
Sure. Yeah. So it sounds like you're training quite a bit right now and, preparing for the Leadman, you're going to be running, many miles a week preparing for that. How do you ensure that if you're training 15, 20 hours a week, even preparing for the Leadville mountain bike race, that it's not a detraction from your overall energy balance to attack the things that you want to do on social media, that you want to do business-wise, that you're present for those sauna sessions in the evening? Because I know I probably take it to an extreme, doing 25 hours of training a week for professional triathlon, and I know that that's a big suck from other areas of my life. So how are you maintaining that balance?
Yeah, I mean, ebb and flow out of it. So, I'm not going to make Leadman an annual thing. This is a one and done. Yeah. High Rocks does not require the type of training that an Ironman does or a Leadman does. High Rocks, I'm training 15 hours a week, but it's a really good balance of strength, anaerobic, aerobic. I feel really good training for High Rocks. Leadman, I know I will not feel good for, but it's just something that I've always wanted to do. And I just did rim to rim to rim in the Grand Canyon a couple months ago. And like towards the end of that, the last 2 or 3 hours, I was deep in the pain cave, like Ironman type feeling pain cave. And it was just a reminder of those years when I was competing in Ironman, how that massively built my resilience. So I want to throw my hat in that ring again one more time, but I'm not going to make it a lifestyle because you're so right. Like there's so many repercussions that come from that. You're tired in the evenings. You might not be as creative. You're not as present with your family. So, I have recognized that over all of the things I've done that like, here's healthy training. Here's, okay, I just want to like go above the ceiling for a bit and prove something to myself. But then I'm going to come back below the ceiling and kind of like level everything out again.
Yeah. Yeah. It's an interesting balance to find. So yeah, really interesting there. I want to talk more about maybe your audience on social media and what people gravitate towards. So as you're ebbing and flowing through High Rocks, CrossFit, mountain bike, are people being more receptive to certain types of content? Like, do you have a bigger High Rocks audience because that's blowing up right now, or are people getting really invested in like whatever you do?
Yeah. So, I mean, I've changed so much through the years where initially it was built very much on Ironman training. And then there was this period of time where it was just like I had a very unique lifestyle. And I think people wondered how I supported my lifestyle of just exercising all the time, because at that point, I really wasn't involved intimately in any of the businesses. This is kind of from like 2016 to 2019. And, I wasn't working with a number of brands that I work with now. And the last 5 or 6 years, I'd say it's a mix of lifestyle, interesting lifestyle, the freedom and flexibility to, be out in the mountains quite a bit and be at a gym with interesting people. High Rocks is definitely something people have taken interest in the last, more just 6 months, because I did my first High Rocks race in 2021. Maybe did a couple in 2022 and then hadn't done one again up until last November. So, I was not immersed in that world like I have been this year. I did 4 races this year, and this year I started sharing more content around how I was shifting my training from, being more CrossFit focused to being more High Rocks focused. And I have a really low heart rate when I run. I'm sure you do too. I mean, many endurance athletes do. And also, being 45, my heart rate has come down over time. So I know that captivates people's interest when I go out and run, a low or mid 7 minute per mile pace at a 129 heart rate. They're like, how is that possible? And I'm like, well, I mean, I used to do this all the time in, my 30s when I was running, 60 miles a week. So I definitely have some really good, audience engagement around running, heart rate training, High Rocks training. But I would say what captivates people's interest the most, like just relatable, is, I stopped drinking in my 20s, and here's where I am in my 40s. I started getting into wellness in my late 20s. Here's where I am in my 40s. I think that story resonates with the most amount of people. And if I was smart and didn't have the ADD that I have of like, I want to post my mountain bike video today from Leadville, and I want to post about this, High Rocks race. I want to post about, this cool person I was biking with today. I would just run with that because that is the most relatable. Those posts tend to perform the best. But, if I'm out in Leadville riding the course, like I want to show people the Leadville course. I think it's cool. I'm doing something fun, and I think it's going to inspire some people to sign up for Leadville. So, I probably am still a little too broad with what I share. But Yeah, I mean, I think it's a combination of all of those things.
Sure. Yeah, you mentioned the perfect day, and I'm sure that's something that you're sharing quite a bit on social media. Can you walk me through in detail, like a day in the life on a perfect day?
Yeah, easy. So wake up, no alarm, around 6 a.m. most days. Varies, when the sun's coming up. Our dog has been waking up at like 5:30 in the morning because the sun is up a little earlier right now. So we kind of usually wake up with her. Go downstairs, drink some water, make a coffee, take supplements, and the first hour and a half, 2 hours of my day usually are spent doing something I know I won't get to later in the day. So, that might be a thoughtful email I have to send. That might be, creating a piece of content or brainstorming content for the week, getting some posts done for scheduling some posts for the week. And then around 9 o'clock, I head to the gym. Most days, some days, especially this time of year, I'm biking first just because it's getting hotter in the afternoons. But usually, gym is my first session. I try to prioritize what I know I won't get to later in the day, earlier in the day. So like a strength training session, an anaerobic conditioning, it's really easy to skip that and be like, I'm too tired from the bike ride. I'm not going to go to the gym this afternoon. Whereas like biking and running, I can usually do those much better after doing the strength training session. So in the gym, I usually have 5 to 15 people that work out with me on a pretty regular basis. We have our little group chat where I'll throw the workout in there every single day and people can, pick and choose what they want to do of the workout. That session is usually about 90 minutes. And I really look at that as setting me up for the rest of the day to be like creative, energized, thoughtful. After the workout, usually by 10:45, 11, I have calls scheduled through like 1:30. I use Calendly, so I just have time blocks of when people can book meetings with me. Those are generally either brands I work with, brands that want to work with me, young entrepreneurs that have reached out to me on social media that want advice, people building brands that want advice, people interested in how I created my lifestyle. I mean, I'll send my Calendly link to most people that send me a thoughtful message on Instagram. So usually on calls for a couple hours. And then, I know after 2.5 hours of communicating with people, my mind is going to be a little fried and I need to go off into the mountains and just kind of hit that reset button. So that's usually when I do my bike ride. Most days I'm only 60 to 90 minutes of either biking. Running is less volume, might be 45 to 60 minute runs. But most days I'm doing 2 workouts a day. And then after that, I have another time block of when I'm taking calls with people. So that's usually from like 3 to 5. And then around 5, people are showing up to hit the sauna with me. And, all throughout the day though, I'm creating content. I'm shooting stuff while I'm on the bike. I'm shooting stuff while I'm running. Thoughts are coming to me. I mean, this doing endurance sports. Like, I feel like that's when I have my best ideas is when I'm out there exercising. So I kind of consider that to be a lot of my work time as well, because that's when all the ideas are coming to me. And then it's like easy to post that really creative thing as soon as I get done from my run because I marinated on it for 60 minutes. So a lot of the work is done out there. And I'm creating content all throughout the day, some intentional and some just not knowing when I might use it. Really cool shot in Leadville biking. I might use that 3 months from now when something comes to me about heart rate training at elevation. Oh, I have that clip from Leadville I can use. So I just have this massive database of content that I've shot over the years, and much of it is organized into, running, biking, backyard, time with Sarah, cooking. So I can easily just kind of pluck it whenever I need to create content for either a brand or just content that I think will resonate with people. After the sauna session, some people stay over for dinner, cook at the house almost every single night. And then like 30, 40 minutes in the evening, wind down time, hang with Sarah, walk Blaze, watch something on Netflix, hit the hay by 9:41, I think is what my Aura says my bedtime is every single night. And then it says I wake up pretty much every single day at 6:01 a.m.
Sure. So I've got 2 follow-ups. The first one, I'm curious, and I think the audience would be curious as well, to be walked through a little bit of like the fueling, the supplementation, what you're doing for intra-workout fueling, and how you recover. I think because the demands of training for endurance sports and the fueling that's required for that are one thing, and then kind of the same thing goes for something that's anaerobic in nature, like powerlifting or whatever. So can you walk us through sort of your day in terms of supplementation and eating?
You bet. So I'm pretty simple, and I build calories throughout the day. I have my biggest meal in the evening at dinner. I've found that for me, having a lot of food and mental clarity, they don't go hand in hand. If I have, a giant steak and potatoes and rice, yeah, I'm really fulfilled, but I don't have much mental clarity after that. So I eat really light throughout the day. I wake up, have coffee, I might put colostrum in it or some kind of creamer, take supplements. Creatine is one of my foundation supplements that I've taken every single day for a very long time now. I'll take some type of either multivitamin or like a greens powder that's going to check a lot of boxes, whether that's AG1 or a multivitamin based on my blood work from Blokes. I take Timeline, MitoPure, mitochondrial health supplements. I feel like there's a lot of studies going into this space about, supplements that can help improve mitochondrial health. And, I've been around enough like high achieving 60-year-olds and 70-year-olds who, basically tell me like mitochondria is key when you're our age. If you still want to mountain bike in your 70s, you got to do everything for your mitochondrial possible right now. What else? I take a sleep supplement most nights. Lately, it's been Cherry Bundy, which has melatonin in it. Magnesium I'll take in the evenings as well, just to calm my mind before bed. I have access to tons of supplements, but those are the ones that I would travel with on a regular basis to make sure I'm getting in every single day. First meal is generally after the gym session. So morning workout, I'm not having much. Maybe I'll have a bar, maybe I'll have a banana if it's a longer workout. But for 60 to 90 minutes, I generally don't need too much. Afterwards, I either do a smoothie, which is pretty basic, whey protein, a banana, some yogurt, milk, frozen berries, or I'll do eggs, fruit, and honey. That's my first 2 meals of the day. So I'll do that after the morning workout, and then I'll also do that after my bike ride or run in the afternoon. And then dinner is usually 16 ounces of some kind of meat, steak, burger, chicken, whatever it is I'm craving that night. Usually barbecue it on our smoker. And I'll do some kind of carb, rice, potatoes, sweet potatoes, and then some veggies, a side salad or some broccolini, just some kind of greens. And then at night, I snack on fruit and honey and a little nut butter pretty much every single night. At one point, I was eating at least a jar of almond butter every single night when I was competing in triathlon.
That's kind of the thing with triathlon. I had this as a comment in there, and I wanted to get your opinion on it. I don't think triathlon training is healthy for you. It seems like what your lifestyle is sort of like what I would maybe get to in retirement, where I get my endurance hit, I'm in the gym getting that sort of explosive stuff in. There's a lot of catabolic effects from triathlon training. Did you feel that when you were doing
100%.
triathlon?
100%. Definitely did. Yeah, because I was neglecting strength training. I was neglecting anaerobic conditioning. So I just felt weak, not powerful. And I mean, the workouts in triathlon are so long and you're feeling with so much sugar, it definitely isn't healthy at a super high level for a lifetime. I think it's an important journey for people to do like hard things for a period of time. But, again, I think like being a little below the ceiling is always going to be better for overall longevity. And yeah, I just kind of had lulls throughout the day when I was training for triathlon. Like I usually felt pretty tired in the evenings, didn't really want to do much. If you go on a 5-hour bike ride, you're spent. Whereas a 60-minute gym workout, I'm energized for the day. 30-minute run, I'm energized for the day. Hour bike ride, at a 135, 140 heart rate, I'm energized for the day. So, there's definitely overdoing it. And I mean, this goes for anything, whether you're a top CrossFit athlete or, Olympic athlete. Like if you're the elitist at any level, it's generally A, probably unhealthy, and B, you're just constantly playing with that fine line of injured and peak fitness.
Yeah, fit or fucked is kind of the way that we call it in triathlon. Where the pros are definitely, I've been treading that line very closely the last few years. As you're preparing for Leadville, I think that the demand of that race, and I think even the Leadman running 100 miles, those are going to require a higher level of investment in the fueling and the education
100%.
on the fueling. So are you starting to experiment with what you're going to do for Leadville now and start to think what you're going to do for Leadman? Because that is probably going to require like quite a bit of sugar during it, quite a bit of caffeine, fluid, sodium. Like, are those things that you're trying to experiment with now? And what are you finding is working well?
Yeah, 100%. So, now as I build for Leadville, my rides are getting longer. Generally, if my ride is under 2 hours, I don't take much with me. I mean, most of my rides, I'm doing at a 125 heart rate. It's not a high effort. But, in Leadville, riding 3+ hours, yes, I'm fueling. I'm trying to get about 60 to 80 grams of carbs per hour. That could be maple syrup packets, could be honey, could be gels, could be Morton bars. And then I usually have 1,000 milligrams of element, sodium, potassium, magnesium, is it magnesium?
Yep.
In my water bottle, along with a shot of Ketone IQ. That's what I'll have for my bottles. And I'm trying to do about a bottle per hour, anything over 3 hours. Could I benefit from higher carb in those workouts that are under 2 and 2.5 hours? I definitely could. I just have found that I don't feel great, fueling with that much sugar. Yeah. So, and again, like I'm not going to win Leadville. I'm going for, I have my time goal. It's not anywhere close to what a pro's time goal would be. And same with triathlon. I was never a pro triathlete. So, I was doing a lot of this to compete against myself. And I know that to go to a higher level, you have to be more extreme with this stuff. But as I got more extreme with it, I just recognized that I didn't feel as good. And I'm doing all of this now much more to feel good day in and day out than I am I'm not winning any money at any of these. And, my following isn't based around me being in the podium. So, I have some ego wrapped into my results, but I have no ego wrapped into how I'm competing against others with it.
Yeah, that's a great perspective, and one that I'm a little bit jealous of because a lot of mine is wrapped up in winning and losing.
I get it.
I want to talk a little bit more because I'm curious. Before I even, got to research you for this podcast, I knew you as a Ketone IQ guy, and you mentioned that here, and they have no affiliation to me or the podcast. Although Charlie Lawrence, who you might know, sent me some Ketone IQ, and he's an alum of the pod. He came on a couple weeks ago, and a buddy of mine. And so I'm curious to hear about sort of why you like that, what it does for you, and sort of why you're an advocate for it.
Yeah, so it's the feeling of ketosis without having to be in ketosis. So during my Ironman years, I was eating a really high-fat, high-veggie, low-carb diet, and I wasn't ever testing, but I think many days I was in ketosis. I did have a lot of mental clarity throughout the day, and I like that feeling a lot. And Ketone IQ gives me that similar feeling where I just feel really dropped in. And, I really feel like, once you have the physical ability in any sport, so much of it is mental. And endurance sports, the mental component is how good are you at being in the moment? How good are you at flow state? How good are you at not thinking about how much time has elapsed and how much time is to go? Last year, I didn't look at my bike computer until I was 6 hours in. And my longest training ride leading up to Leadville last year was only 2 hours and 45 minutes. So, I was just dropped in. I was in flow with nature and the people out there. It was almost like a psychedelic experience. And, it's a combination, obviously, of exerting yourself, being in nature, being around other people, having to be present so you don't crash, and having the Ketone IQ. But that's what I like about it. I just feel like it fuels flow state for me. I think they have a lot of studies out now about how it can, I think you need a lot of it, but it can boost EPO, can help with recovery. They're coming out with lots of different clinical trials around it. And obviously there's a lot of pro triathletes and cyclists and teams who are using it. But for me, I've always been very feeling based. I'll certainly read stuff and try to understand what it's doing, but I want to feel it. I'm a one-man science experiment. If I feel good doing it, then I'll keep doing it. If it doesn't do anything for me, then, I'm not going to bother doing it.
Yeah, it's an interesting one because I feel like, especially in triathlon, I think endurance sports in general, we go through these like peaks and valleys of what's hot and what's not. So I think like at one point the ketones were getting so hot, and I think like Tim was sponsored by Delta G, which is a rival company to Ketone IQ, and he had me on Delta G, and he was saying, "Oh, this is the best." And then I think you transitioned a little bit further, and then you get the lactate testing, and then you get the high carb fueling, and then you get the core sensor and the heat training that's happening now. And so it almost feels like it's cyclical with what gets popularized or whatever. And I think some of it's due to the science that comes out, but some of it's due to the influence. So interesting to hear your perspective on that. I want to rewind to one thing you mentioned during your perfect day. And I'm just curious to hear more about, you mentioned that the workouts, like your 9 a.m. strength session and your 1 or 2 p.m. bike ride, those are your sort of breaks and resets and hit pause buttons from the work. But at the same time, you are capturing the content throughout the day and during those sessions. Because I know for myself, I find it really difficult when I'm out training to manage like capturing content. Like I'm so immersed, and maybe this is my personality. Like I wrap myself so much in the focus of the session, and maybe that's just my personal, what I'm doing, being a professional athlete. Like I feel like I owe it that time and that dedication to be 100% present. Do you feel a detraction from the value of the workout when you are creating the content, or does it add value to the session, or is it neutral?
I would say it's neutral. It doesn't add value, but for me, it doesn't take away. And again, because most of the aerobic stuff I'm doing, it's at a moderately low heart rate. I'm not massively exerting myself. I have my phone with me everywhere I go. And, I'm not out there like creating skits. I'm not like stopping and setting up my camera and riding by it. I mean, I'm literally just putting my phone on 0.5 zoom. And if I have a thought that comes to me while I'm out there, I'll record that quick and then put my phone away. So yeah, I'm not going out of my way with any of it. I do prioritize the workout over anything. Like I want to get a good workout in. I want to be present in the workout. I want to enjoy nature. I want to have a good bike ride. I want to have a good run. But for me, it's not a hassle to take my phone out and film little bits and pieces of it. But again, I'm not setting it up. It's not a production by any means. I'm not bringing a drone out there with me. I literally have my phone 0.5 zoom, holding it up like this and filming a little bit of my bike ride, maybe talking about something that I'm thinking about, and boom, it goes, back in my shorts.
Sure. Are there points in the day where you're going like techless? You mentioned in the sauna, that's a moment where you put it away. I mean, are there other points in the day where you're saying, okay, because similarly, I'm on my phone most of the day when I'm not training, whether I'm taking calls or talking with clients, whatever, or on my computer preparing for the podcast. Are you putting the devices away at any other point in the day?
It's on airplane mode when I'm biking and running. I don't want to be distracted while I'm out there. I don't put it on airplane mode at the gym. I usually leave it on throughout the gym, but I'm not like messaging people and stuff when I'm in the gym session. But no, there's no times where I just am like, no phone right now, other than the sauna because it's going to overheat. So yeah, I don't have my phone in with me at that point.
Cool. Yeah. No, good to know. All right. Well, that's the majority of the questions that I have here before we get into our rapid fire to wrap up the podcast here. Is there anything that you want to mention or that you want to shout out before we get into the rapid fire?
No.
All right. Awesome. Well, appreciate you being so transparent in all your answers today. So first rapid fire question that I have is, what is the ideal number of coffees per day and what's the maximum acceptable limit?
Yeah, 2 for me. I like doing an espresso in the morning with a little cream. I have all sorts of coffee makers. You definitely got to come over sometime if you like coffee. I have a Rocket Apartamento, like espresso maker where, that's 100% art. I have a Terra Cafe Science where you just, hit a button and you get whatever you want. I just got like 2 or 3 months ago this cold brew coffee machine where it's stainless steel pods. You can do a nitro cold brew, a regular cold brew, or a cold espresso. Absolutely amazing. And then I have like your typical, coffee machine that's really pretty that doesn't get used much. So yeah, 2. I usually do one right when I wake up around 6:30, and then I'll usually do another one after my gym session with my breakfast or lunch, whatever you want to call it, that first meal I have with the day. And then what's the most? I mean, if I'm in New York City or like a city that has awesome cafes, sometimes I'll have upwards of 3 or 4 just bouncing around to different cafes. I would say 4 is my upper limit of, then I'm just going to crash. I'm not going to feel great after having 4 or more. In an Ironman, though, I mean, I bet I was upwards of 800 milligrams, maybe even 1,000 milligrams of caffeine during a race with all the gels and, caffeine in the bottle. And yeah, I do feel like you have to drug yourself in these endurance things to just get through it and, keep the stoke high.
Yeah, I'm with you. Triathlon ain't healthy. Just repeat that here. I'm with you. I think 2 is my optimal level as well. I'm a big coffee guy, so I'll definitely have to come over. I'm really looking forward to the sauna situation already, but I think the coffee's really going to put me into another level. I've got a Breville Barista Express, so it's nothing crazy, but I'm 2 a day, and if I need a little single shot in the afternoon for some work, I'll get in there. But I'm with you 100%.
Yeah, I usually cut it off by like 12 or 1, though. I try not to do any caffeine after that because sleep is so important to me.
Me too. Yeah. I mean, like I'm an Oura Ring guy. And so that really has incentivized me to focus less on the coffee. And even if I got to power through work in the afternoon and not grab the one at the 2 p.m., but you can see my coffee over there that I had. Just a couple sips, just make sure we're locked in for the pod. Cool. All right. What is the latest that you're willing to stay up at night with a hard workout scheduled for the next morning?
Oof. 10 p.m.
Yeah. I'm very similar.
Yeah, I avoid late night activities. Red Rocks Amphitheater is 8 minutes from our house. I might go to one show a year. I've said no to big UFC fights because I don't want to stay up late watching it in person, in Vegas. I really, really don't like staying up late at night. I like sticking to my bedtime because my days are so important to me. Like, I love the day. I love 6 a.m. until 8 p.m., and I don't want to affect those hours.
I'm with you 100%. All right, number 3, what is your go-to gas station order if you're in the middle of a long ride?
Ooh, a Snickers bar, and I'm probably getting a Gatorade.
Yeah, nice. All right. You're a Denver guy. Why not Boulder?
I like Boulder a lot, especially, riding with Tim these last few weeks and Alex. I mean, they brought me up to Gold Hill, and we did another ride up Sunshine Canyon over to Batasso. Boulder is massively growing on me. So I moved to Denver in 2017, and at the time I was single, and I had a loft in Rhino, and I really enjoyed like city life. I lived in Syracuse, New York prior to that, so very small city. So living in a big city with access to so much, I just loved that because I had never had that, that taste of life where I was just like in the mix with everything. And then so many of my friends are in Denver. My Boulder network is definitely growing. I could honestly see Boulder as, 3 to 5 years from now, selling our house and getting something similar here with a beautiful view and turning it into kind of a wellness place here. We're actually building a house in Austin right now that's going to be done in like a week and a half. And we're going to be splitting time. We're going to be doing the winters in Austin and then summers back here. But I mean, people matter so much to me. Having community matters so much to me. That's so much of the Austin move. Like, I love city life in Austin, but ultimately the draw to Austin is I just have so many amazing friends there. The wellness scene is exploding. Want to host tons of people at our house there. So, I just didn't have that in Boulder because I haven't spent enough time here to have that kind of network that I have in a place like Denver or Austin.
Yeah, I mean, here the natural beauty of this place is really hard to beat. I think also you get somewhat of a city with Pearl Street where we are right here, and if you like cafe culture, like, you'll have to next time you come to Boulder, let me know. I'll take you to some of my
great
spots.
Cafes here.
Great cafes here. And I think like the community of people is good, but I'm also very much in my endurance sport bubble where I think people are less likely. I think if you ask the professional athletes in town to do a 5 p.m. sauna session, like, I would go, but I don't know how many others you're going to get. So I feel like Denver's maybe a little bit more of like, okay, working people looking to branch out, creative people, whatever. And I think there is that here. I just wouldn't be able to point you in their direction.
Yeah.
That's not my scene.
Yeah. I mean, our house is 20 minutes west of Denver. So I'm only in the city of Denver maybe once a month now. Sure. I really don't, play in the city. But with that said, like, people are passing through Denver regularly. And, Denver is a big city with lots of people. So there's people in Denver coming to our house to sauna. So I do like having that like pocket and population to pull from.
Sure. All right. Here's a two-parter. So what is one company in the sports or sort of like wellness space that you think is doing everything right, but you're not working with now? And then another company who you could really help.
Great questions. I would have said The Feed, but I just started working with them recently. I've always admired, the company, bought products from them, thought they did a great job at curating products. One I'm not working with now that I like Morton. I really like Morton's products. I don't work with Morton. I love their bars. Sodium bicarb has become incredibly popular, obviously, in the endurance world. I'd say that's one. Center, I would say, is another. They're big in the High Rocks world. They supply all of the gym equipment to the High Rocks races, and we're going to be, outfitting our home in Austin with a full gym setup. So Center would be another one. What was the second component of that question?
Who's a company who you think you could really help?
A company I could really help. I mean, anyone at an early stage is my bread and butter. So, any company in the wellness space that's just spinning up, better for you brands, in the nutrition space, whether it's bars, chips, stuff like that. Are ones where I definitely can add a lot of value. I think one of the products that is, I'm pretty sure it's being worked on. I don't know if anything has launched yet, but like continuous biomarker trackers. So continuously monitoring your testosterone levels, cortisol levels, cholesterol, all of that stuff. That's a company I would really like to work with in the future, and I think I could massively help them, especially, where I am in my mid-40s, longevity, all of that is just such a hot topic in my age bracket and older.
Cool. All right, final one here. What is something you're personally really excited about in the next 12 months? That could be athletically, business-wise, both.
The Austin house for sure. I mean, that's going to be the biggest thing in the next 12 months is just outfitting that house, setting it up as this really cool community hub. And then I have another business called Founders Only that is growing tremendously right now. We host wellness retreats for founders of wellness companies, creators, investors, athletes. And we just had the last one in Denver. We had 35 people at it. A lot of it was at our house, barbecue there, sauna. and the Austin house is going to be used for that too. But again, I really love curating people together and like-minded people together. So I see Founders Only continuing to grow, and I want to do it in cool locations like Moab or Bozeman, or just places where I either have been and spent a lot of time, or places where I want to go and I want other people to experience it with me. And then we're building an online component to that as well that's going to just have lots of resources for any of those pockets: founders, investors, creators.
Cool. All right, man. Well, you're an absolute legend. I appreciate all of the answers today on the podcast. It's a pleasure getting to know you. Thank you so much for coming on.
Thanks for having me, Justin.